After multiple postponed court dates, Idaho murder suspect Brian Berger is set to appear before a judge for a pretrial hearing. That judge weighing several big issues right now during this first public hearing in months, including a trial date and a change of venue motion. Berger is accused of killing 4 Idaho college students in 2022. DNA left on a knife sheath found at the scene linked him to the crime, and he was taken into custody 6 weeks after the murders. Legal analyst and trial attorney Misty Marris joining us live on this. Misty, always good to see you. And let's talk about this. We know today's hearing comes after 2 canceled court appearances last month. What can we expect from today?
Today, we're going to really get a sense of when this trial is going to take place. And that's because a lot of what's going to be addressed relates to scheduling issues, pretrial motions relating to really important aspects of this case, such as expert discovery, motions relating to whether or not Berger will face the death penalty. And one of the issues that's before the court that's really going to be important for the decision and when this trial is going to take place, whether the defense will be granted a change of venue. So from today's hearing, we're really going to get a sense of the timeline leading up to that trial date and also a sense of some of the issues at play relating to the evidence that we're going to see come into that trial when it actually goes forward.
Let's talk about that change of venue, because Berger's defense team is certainly pushing for this. What is the likelihood, in your opinion, that that's actually granted?
What's really interesting about Berger's defense team theory on the change of venue, it's a little different than we've seen in the past, because in general, a high-profile case, just because it's high profile, does not necessarily it's not necessarily the springboard for an actual change of venue. Usually that's not a successful argument. But what Berger's defense team did here was they went in the county where this horrible incident took place, where the jury pool would be, and they did polling. And so they sent out these questionnaires to those that would be prospective jurors. And their argument is the result of the questionnaires showed that there was a strong bias against Berger. So that's going to be one of the central arguments. In a case like this, the argument is always that in this particular community, emotions run so high, but it's difficult to get that change of venue regardless of those arguments because you have a case that's garnered such national interest. There isn't a jurisdiction in the country that hasn't formulated an opinion or heard of this case.
Yeah, so Misty, I was about to ask you about that. Do you think there is a single place that he could move within this country where the jury is not going to have a very strong opinion about Berger already in this case?
No, it's very unlikely. The way that this case has captured, of course, it's such a terrible tragedy, but it's captured, there's multiple very, very public documentaries. There's all sorts of things out there on this case, and it's really captured the attention of people across the country and across the world. So there likely isn't a jurisdiction where there's going to be a jury pool that doesn't have a lot of information about the case, but that's not necessarily the analysis. They're focused on the emotional impact in this specific county. Again, that happens in every high-profile case. It's a very similar argument. So could it be successful? Well, maybe. It's really up to the judge's discretion, but I think it's unlikely that we see this case moved.
And this entire case, does it seem to you that it has been drawn out? These murders happened in late 2022. Berger's arrest took place just 6 weeks later. Is it normal for the pretrial process to take this long?
It's not abnormal. So sometimes we do see trials that are more on what I would call a rocket docket, but there's an issue about whether or not a defendant waives their right to a speedy trial. And so in those cases where there are very complicated evidentiary issues, especially those involving DNA and expert analysis, it isn't necessarily that uncommon for a case to take this much time to get into the courtroom. And here we have all of those different aspects at play, especially when it comes to the forensics in this case. And we also have a gag order, so we also don't necessarily know every single thing that's going into those decisions to continue to punt these hearings.
Understood. If we do get a trial date set in the books, what can we expect to happen next?
Well, the next thing is going to be a speed line to all these motions filed. It's going to be about what evidence is actually going to come into the courtroom. We're going to see a big issue relating to the death penalty, whether or not the death penalty is actually going to be something that prosecutors are going to be arguing before the jury. So that's one threshold issue. But what we're going to see from the basically the schedule moving forward and the motion practice relating to evidence, which is typical before a trial. There's a lot of disputes about what evidence is going to come into the courtroom. We're going to get a sense of what the defense is going to be, how the prosecution is formulating their case. So with each and every filed motion relating to these issues, it could give us more insight to what we're going to see when that trial unfolds.
Okay, always appreciate the time and insight, Misty Marris. Thank you so much.
Thank you.